Even if we disagree with the parents, we have to disagree in the other room with the door closed. Never, ever challenge a parent about their parenting in front of the children. That's a never, ever.
Welcome to The Power of Family, the podcast where we help families talk, listen, and connect across generations. I'm your host, Terry Willis. Before we begin, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast, share this episode with a family member or friend, and leave us a review. Your support helps us reach more families, and your feedback helps us continue making this show even better for you. Today, I'm joined by Neil Taft, author of The Bridge to Your Grandchildren, What Their Parents Want You to Know. Neil is also a retired youth minister, a lifelong youth advocate, and someone who has spent decades thinking deeply about how families can remain connected across generations. Neil Taft, how are you doing there, sir?
I am doing wonderful, thank you.
Thank you, too, for coming. Niels, I read your information. It's extensive, but I want you to share with the audience, our listeners, our viewers. Share with them, tell us something about Neil Taft.
Neil Taft is an accidental author of 5 books on grandparenting. Neat little story. My son invited me to a seminar in Atlanta, Georgia on Web 2.0. I'm not a computer guy. I don't like sitting in front of a computer. And at the time I was doing real estate investment, I wasn't going to look for houses online. But my 52-year-old son wanted to do something with his dad, so I said, sure. So I went to Atlanta. We came home and we began to understand that the written word online, using keywords, et cetera, you could attract attention. So we started off with a website, an e-commerce website that worked. So then I wanted to do something, and I asked him I said, Chuck, I want to write a blog. Now, this is 20 years ago. So we went to lunch, and God bless him, he reached across the table and put his hand on my arm and said, Dad, you know I love you, but you'll write a blog, 2 or 3 people in the family will read it for a month, maybe 2, and then they too will wane. I said, that's okay. I'm committed. I want to do this. He said, okay, then choose a subject that you're passionate about. I said, that's easy. I'm the best grandpa I know. He said, okay, write a 1-pager, and we'll, on the website, you write your little articles, but we'll give that 1 page away and start to get emails back and see if there's an interest here. Long story long, within 3 months, I had 1,000 people a month coming to my website about grandparenting.
Wow.
I struck a nerve. So it went from there. Originally, there wasn't much out there. We were dealing with grandparents' rights, things like that. That's a very ugly side of grandparenting. And no, it's also not the right way to approach it. I went on for a while, then let it languish. People were still asking questions. I came back to it 6 years later and started writing from a different point of view. How can I enhance the entire family by being a really good grandparent? And that's where it all started. That was 5 books ago.
And now you have become a legend with it.
Maybe
that's close enough. It's close enough.
Legend, but a very enthusiastic individual. And it's a wonderful passion because it's all upside, Terry. Yeah. I mean, everything we do to enhance a family, albeit one that's in trouble or not, we're helping people out. So it's all upside, but the real winners are the grandkids. And that's what I've been after all along. So that's it's just one of those subjects that I have a hard time going wrong with.
I had a similar, I would like to say, epiphany about this as well. And that is when I stepped on this path, and which is not too long ago, I began to talk to people about why I was doing what I was doing. And I call it quiet conversations. When I was trying to find out about this podcasting thing and about the e-commerce, I had to turn to help. I'm one of those grandparents like you who just didn't quite get it yet. But in the course of me doing that, again, I had these quiet conversations with elders, older people, and I was hearing the stories about what they were going through with their families. And I too said, I have struck a chord here. So I understand that moment in time that you realize I'm onto something here because I'm still experiencing it. In fact, I was just at a aging summit yesterday here in New York City, and I was, of course, at a table full of people. And when I began to share with them what I was doing, once again, it surfaced. I began hearing those stories. And I'll let you keep talking because this is your time now. I just want to share that moment with you.
Well, in very much the same thing. I've not got a thick skull, but I can see patterns. And
yes,
it just began. I've always been a family person. Above my right corner up here, that's 5 generations of my family. I'm holding my great-great-grandbaby right there.
Congratulations.
And that has been, I said in my TEDx talk, all 15 of my grandchildren are still very much in my life. That doesn't just happen. That's the important part of that statement because you have to work at it as you find out. There are things within families. All families have troubles.
Yes, we do.
Find ways to work through it. You don't walk away from family. You find a way through it. Well, especially in grandparenting, because you bring new people in. Terry, the most amazing thing I understood is most of the people in your family, you did not choose to be in your family. In-laws, other grandparents, et cetera,
Sure.
new babies, and consequently, we need new tools. That's where I stepped in. I began like you, talking to people. I have interviewed parents, grandparents, alienated people, mother-in-laws, daughter-in-laws. I had a very unique, you talk about getting the messages. I was on a podcast. This is a women on women podcast here local in town, one of my Toastmasters friends. She has this podcast of up and coming women. Well, she was a guest, I think. So she has this 81-year-old man at the time to come on her podcast. She asked me a question. She said, what do you think the biggest mistake grandparents make with their grandchildren? Or with what do you think the biggest mistake grandparents make in the family? And I said they fail to revere and honor the mother of their grandchildren. That statement in the next 2 weeks and still going now went to 1.9 million people on TikTok. You think I struck a nerve?
Yes, you did.
And the nerve is, it's not that they're bad people. I read all the comments, these mothers of grandchildren. They are misunderstood. All they want to be is be seen, heard, and valued. That's all you want. That's all I want. That's what every human being we meet wants. And so I say all that to say is within the family, that's kind of the core. How do we find a way not just to communicate, but to honor people, to understand them and our differences? So that's the way I have built mine. My enthusiasm builds every time I see people that have stayed in there, a lot of reconciliations and things like that. So I just keep stumbling on good things, and it's all talking to really good people. I am of the volition that most people are good, and most people want this thing to work out. There's just some misunderstandings.
I like what you said there about being respectful and taking care of the grandchild's mother.
Yes.
In my own words, in my own doings, I say to people, and many of us know it, you judge a person by how they treat their mother. If you see something wrong there, look out. And I'm going to carry those words, how you phrased it now, and how you have learned it, because that adds a different tenor to this. It's not just the mother here. It's also the grandmother saying this as well. Yeah.
If everybody, there used to be some pretty terrible jokes in grandparenting,
Yeah.
The grandkids and the grandparents get along because we got the same enemy and all. No. And I immediately, that didn't settle well with me. If we stop to understand, say if you've got a son, he brings home a young lady. She's scared. She gets to meet the new family. Most times, family don't approve of her because they didn't have the choice.
Mm-hmm.
And they find sort of passive aggressive ways to let that be known.
Mm-hmm.
It progresses. Your son falls in love with her. We forget to stop right there and go back and do the tracks over again and make it better, because that is the person that is going to be the mother of your grandchildren.
Absolutely.
Not only that, but she has the keys to the kingdom, Terry.
Yes, she
She
does.
runs the whole family. She takes care of myriad items every day of scheduling and everything else. And if you don't find a way, now I'm not saying there are not
Of
problems,
course.
not issues, but there you have to find a way. And everybody enters this at various levels. Some people, some remarriages, you inherit a whole bunch of in-laws and all this stuff, and there's been good and bad times and everything else. But if you stop to think, if we could back it all up, the honoring and respecting should start when she walks through the door with your son, because that's the first impression. That's where she feels either part of the family or not part of the family. When I was a youth minister, I used to recommend most of my kids aged out of youth ministry. And I would recommend when they started dating to ask their parents, if they dating a young lady or a young man that they like, ask their parents to go to dinner with them and get to know that person. The whole purpose of the dinner is just to get to know them, not to interrogate them, not to ask pointed questions that are trying to get certain answers, just to get to know them, because if they become part of the family, that's one of the best insurance policies you've used. And when I learned about you, and our mutual friend, Greg Payne, told me all about you, when I learned you were working on family, that was one of the things I understood, because this is family building. And grandparents usually have the wisdom and the ability and the time to build the family back again. And I think that's why I am in the grandparenting space, because there's a lot of things we can do, even if mistakes have been made, and they will be. But it's just a matter of keeping our eye on the ball, which is the best interest of the grandchildren.
And adding to that, as to me being in this space, yes, I'm in this space because I realized that I wasn't the only one having this issue. And when it hit my doorstep, I said, wow, wow, here it is. I have seen this as a young child myself, and I was looking at the elders. And as I grew, it was still the elders. But now I am the elder, and we have a responsibility here. As you said, it's the experience that we bring here. We understand that we can't tell a young person what to do. Let's just throw that out the window. That's where a lot of the issues are. Parents and grandparents wanting to tell the kids what to do. And some of them, before they reach the age of 18, They are bucking you right back.
They're supposed to.
Yeah.
That's a necessary separation psychologically. They are.
Mhm.
I call it. My famous saying is, I call it the leaving and the cleaving. It's in Scripture, and that is their job, to leave the family and cleave to their mate and make their own family unit. Now, that doesn't mean nobody talks to each other. That
Of
means
course.
now release that person, because if you did a good job raising them, it's easier. But a lot of people hang on to some stuff, and it really does. It it's very deep and very quiet, but it's very often behind the scenes. It's not usually both parents; it's one parent hanging on a little bit.
Mhm.
But if they find a way to do that, they're going to eventually have to do it to have a healthy family.
Yes.
It's so much easier now than trying to repair. It's easier to keep air in your tires than it is to repair a flat tire that you've run off on it. So it is, and they sound like platitudes, but they're not. They're done in the everyday conversation. I asked a question of 100 people in the audience recently. I said, please raise your hand if you have zero drama or trauma in your immediate family. They laughed.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I got to turn off my mic now.
Terry, I know the answer to that question. I'd be a good lawyer. That's an easy one. But these were 100 people of all ages and everything else. But so we start with the fact that we are flawed as a
Sure.
families, but
Sure.
yet even through all that, there's things we can do to quit digging holes that we're going to fall into, if you will. So it is it's something that I see happen normally. We're pretty late in the process. If I could talk to young parents of teenage kids, I could head a lot of stuff off with the experiences. I told 10 stories in my second last book about how people fall into these traps. They're not bad people. They got along with their kid fabulous till about 18, 19, and then things started going, and they started trying to force it back.
Mhm.
And of course, that doesn't work. We know that. But
Mhm.
and you can't just you've got to build trust. You've got to build openness to have a good effect. I talk a lot about legacy in grandparenting, and we do it in parenting too. My two grown children, 56 and 57 years old, I've talked to both of them twice today. One of them lives 6.5 hours away, another lives here in town, but I talked to her by phone. I built that 50 years ago, and you have to build that they want to speak to you. Well, now you introduce other people into the family, you've got to build that same level. Like you say, you don't tell them what to do.
Mhm.
Now, you may ask them, would you like my opinion? Or do you just want me to listen? And that'll unload the gun in a heartbeat, because you're giving respect to the other person and choice agency. So I see it happen over and over and over again in families. And the one thing I abhor in life is wasted energy. And all that rebuilding is not necessary, because in the end, you're going to have to do it anyway.
It's true. I'm going to hit you with a question here. Parents and grandparents often share the same goal, wanting what is best for the children. Why then can it be so difficult for them to understand one another and work together? Similar to what you're talking about right now. That's why I brought it up.
I would say two things. Parents want something different from their children than grandparents do. However, you can't skip the step in between. So I see that if you have to either communicate very clearly with the parents For instance, my son and daughter-in-law, all those kids are now 19, 20, and 21. I still ask when I go up on the weekend, I'll say, what are we working on now? Are we working on career? Are we working on how we doing on snacks and stuff? How we doing on this? And it gets more having to do with snacks and food when they get younger, but still, I still ask what we're working on. And you'd be amazed because I may have missed something. I haven't seen them in 3 or 4 months. And they'll say, well, Gabe is trying to learn how to drive, but he's really not paying attention. Can you help us with that? So I'll go riding with him and I'll tell him a story about the time that I lost sight of the gravel road and tipped my Jeep over and stuff like that. So, you want to see where it happened? And that's a story from Grandpa as opposed to Dad saying, don't you dare do this and all that kind of stuff. There's ways, and it's worked over the years. Sometimes it was screen time. The 3 things that AARP found out that are the most contentious between grandparents and parents are safety, any kind of safety. But that's the number one thing we all want for our kids. Snacks, food, screen time, and bedtime. Those are the 3. Snacks, screen time, and bedtime. Take those 3 out, you're down to arguing over about 15% what the kids do. You can agree on those things. So that's in answer to your question, one way to that is communication. You talk about it ahead of time. I even have the habit now, this one, not everybody subscribes to this. I talk about what we're talking about with the kids in front of the kids. If they're in the other room, I let them hear me.
Mm-hmm.
It's a powerful message to know that Grandpa and Mom and Dad are talking about them and they care about them. That doesn't always work, but that's one of my ways of doing that. But communications with the parents, especially if I have an autistic great grandson, and I have a couple of ADHD behavior problem grandkids. I ask, I'm not an expert in autism, so I ask, what do I do if I communicate so that they don't have a meltdown while we're down at the store or something like that, and I handle it all wrong. So communication's one thing. The other thing I think we can do is to ask the parents if you can get them a snack. Ask the parents if you're going to take them to a movie and they're going to be up 30, 45 minutes later. Ask the parents, what are we working on now? You honor the parents and you learn not to cross boundaries that are going to cause you trouble.
Great. And as I'm still at that stage where I'm dealing with the younger grandchildren, I'm going to carry that one forward. Yeah. Grandparents often have valuable life experience and generally want to help. How can they offer guidance and support without making parents feel judged, undermined, or overruled?
Even if we disagree with the parents, we have to disagree in the other room with the door closed. Never, ever challenge a parent about their parenting in front of the children. That's a never, ever. In general, if you have a doubt about something, I would suggest you don't do it. If you want to take a kid skydiving and you can't reach mom, don't take them skydiving. There's another time you can do that. If you feel uncomfortable about what you're doing, I think we have an intuitive sense, especially if we pay attention to the families anyway. But you're very seldom get in trouble if you're not crossing the boundaries that are pretty obvious. If you cross one of the smaller ones, if you get them a sugary drink sometime or something like that, and you should have thought better of it, they're not going to kick you out and keep you out. But if you do it knowing that their mom had sat down with you the week before saying they get real weird on sugar and then you bring them back and we can't control them that evening. and they get in trouble, or they don't sleep, or whatever that is. So I suggest that you find ways to go with the parents, not against what they're doing, and never allow that to be something you correct the parents in front of the children about. If you disagree, either disagree quietly, which is usually the best because it's not your choice, and if you don't understand the boundary, that's a great conversation to have with the parents. Say, I bumped up against a boundary today and I'm not sure of it, so I did not do it. You bothered it. But can you give me some guidance in this? Where's the edge? Where's the limit? And I think that's the best way. We're back to communication again, but it's honoring the parents who are 100% in charge of all that.
110%. 110. In your TEDx talk, you said, you have the right to be right, but how much are you willing to pay to exercise your need to be right? What can the need to be right cost the family? And I know that can be plenty.
The next two sentences in that presentation were, as a grandparent, are you willing to risk alienation or estrangement? As a parent, are you willing to give up on the meaningful, lasting connections between the grandparents and your children without at least some conversation? That kind of puts brackets around that idea. I have seen families that have separated 10, 20 years over one comment by somebody who just had to be right.
And it happens so quick. It can happen so quick.
And one of the things, Terry, that a lot of people don't like to hear, but two truths can be truth at the same time. There's your truth and their truth. But guess what? It's their truth. So if you're going to hang on to your being right because this is the way we did it or whatever, that's a conversation you may want to have in the other room with the door closed if it's important enough. Most times it's not. Most of those kind of things are just stuff that you have to do. And one of my books, I tell a story about they had a young man who was incarcerated, and his girlfriend who had a child, the grandparent took over, and he was up for a long time, and she committed suicide because of his abuse, and the judge added years to it, so he wasn't getting out anytime soon. So Grandma and Grandpa went to the court to adopt the child. They needed the father's consent. Grandma worked real hard, to talk him into it, an attorney and all this kind of stuff, and they had him in agreement. They had one last phone call with him to sort of iron out anything. And the grandfather couldn't help himself. The last thing on the phone he said was, "You treated her like dirt. You're no good, blah, blah, blah." Click. A child went in child was 2 years old, went into foster care system and came out at 18 years old, never to be seen by the grandparents again. That's how much. But Grandpa, sure, he was right. The guy was a bum. He beat up on her and all this kind of stuff. But he didn't need to say it. That's
There's
what
a time and place.
That's what I mean by how much are you willing to pay to be right. And again, usually just because you think you're right, you're not going to force other people to think they have to change their mind anyway.
And I'll add to that, because I've seen this, I've been witness to it. It can be the most trivial of matters, just trivial, that causes family to just get torn apart. Trivial. But what's trivial to you and me, it may be monumental to the next person. So, I don't know. It's the other side of what we are up against. We know that there's a need for grandparents and even parents that come together to try and find a way to heal what we know is going on relationship-wise in society. And I'm going to say it, especially with the younger folks.
Yeah.
But we know we cannot just come straight forward at it. We have to be cautious with it. And that cautionary is some things that's trivial to us is monumental and important to other people. It's a thin line.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then it becomes a matter of false pride or whatever that is. And it becomes a tug of war. And
yes,
guess who gets knocked over in the tug of war? Grandchildren. So it is real hard for grandparents to accept the fact that they have to pass the mantle. But there is every culture, Terry, that the Native Americans take their young men particularly, well, the women go through it too. They go into the wilderness and have to fight their way back in. Mm-hmm. There's a maturation process. It's in every religion. It's in bar mitzvah. It's in everything. Confirmation. It is part of the process. Well, guess what, folks? Wake up. When you raise a child and they get married and move away, that's maturation. And you have to be willing to either just give up on all that or find a way to rationalize it and or convince them. But they have to have the right to do that.
Yes, they do. Because they have to make their own decisions in life and be responsible for their own lives. No matter what they do, they are responsible.
Let me give you a little confession. My son raised my granddaughter, who's now 21, most beautiful soul on the face of the earth, on love and logic. I don't know if you've ever, but there are two ministers out in, I think, Kansas, who teach love and logic. And it's a way of raising your children without getting to confrontation and allowing them to be responsible for their own consequences. It's magic. And I watched him do this. He did it 10 times better than I raised him. I mean, I apologized to him. I said, boy, I wish I'd have known that, You
see, but you passed it on to him, though.
Whatever happened, he found it and he did it. So, and there's a lot of things like that because I would not know what to do with children in today's age. I mean, this big screen I'm looking at, they've got it in their hand all day long. Mm-hmm. I didn't have to worry about my kids. I could hear them in the backyard or they got on their bike, they'd be back in 30 minutes. So they have to find their own way of raising these children. And we have to respect that. I came up with an 11th commandment.
Let's hear it.
Thou honor the parents of your grandchildren. That works.
Honor the parents of your grandchildren.
I didn't say agree with. I didn't say bow down to. I said honor. That's
okay. Well, for nearly 20 years, you have written a weekly family newsletter to keep your extended family connected across generations and distances. What has that experience taught you about the importance of intentional communication within families?
My oldest sister and I used to travel up to Cincinnati, Ohio. And from her house, it was 6.5 hours. I would go pick her up and we never turned the radio on in the car. We talked all the way up and all the way back. We were going up to see my little sister and my brother both lived up there and a lot of our nieces and nephews and everything. And she challenged me because at that time, my brother had married and moved away and he had her family. He, spent time with them and my little sister had moved away and all. And the family was getting fragmented. We're now talking, we were in our probably 40s or 50s at that time. And she said, Neil, can we come up with a way to keep the family tied together? Well, I'm the least educated. I told you I'm an accidental author because writing is not, it wasn't for spell check. I would never be where I am now. But she said, would you take on writing a newsletter? You've got a sensitivity and you know the family. And originally it was about 10, 12 people, close cousins and nephews and all stuff like that. She said, would you just start a newsletter in the family? Just let's keep up with birthdays. Let's keep up with who's getting married or whatever. And I said, sure. So I set out doing that. That was 20 years ago. If I'm not mistaken, what is that, 1,000 newsletters ago? And I get to have fun with it. I do a nugget of wisdom every week, and I'll tell about graduation coming up and all. Well, my little 10 or 12 began to grow, and my nephew would write me and say, look, I've got 3 kids. You better tell them happy birthday too. So I'd get their birthdays. And the other thing that was magic about that is, Terry, I sent pictures of the families or spouses together so that people would put together, because some of the cousins never met. So they would put together that Bill and Jean were together or whatever it was, and there would be pictures. So I went down to South Carolina to meet my brother. My one niece and nephew put together a family gathering at Christmas. And in walks this bearded guy, mid-20s, and he came up and grabbed my hand and he said, Uncle Neil, you don't recognize me, but I'm Brad. I said, Brad? He said, yeah, I'm Tim's son. I said, Brad, you were 3 years old the last time I saw you. But then I would include all those things. And what it's done magically is they started communicating with each other. They friended each other back in the day at Facebook and all that kind of stuff. And I get a note from one of them now and then saying, you don't understand how important that was that I heard that. Now, I do sermonize a little bit, and I have my 84-year-old brother's 2 years older than I am. He and I pick on each other. I call him my other brother, and I pick on his golf game a lot. One nephew is a fish guide, so I accuse him of photoshopping these 100-pound catfish that he catches. But we have some fun with it every week, and it always has, but it has the birthdays in there. And if I miss a birthday, I hear about it. If I take a week off to travel, I hear about it. So it has been a cohesion. It's now up to 60 people on the email list. Not all of them are relatives, but their family anyway. But and it's become a power of its own. Even people in our family, they're divorced. The brother-in-law still gets something. Or my sister passed. Her husband, who's now remarried, he can't wait to open it up on Sunday morning. He told his new wife about it and all this kind of stuff. So it is a magic little piece. Takes me about an hour or two. I go on Facebook and find a current picture of a grown-up kid instead, because they don't like 9 years old when they're 16. It became a magic document, and I love doing it. I get to revisit all of them every week. So that's what I get out of it.
Great. Just wonderful. As a retired youth minister and lifelong youth advocate, what do you believe children and young people need most from their parents, grandparents, and other adults in their lives?
Models. They need to know that people are authentically good models. They need to know that they matter. They need to know they have somebody they can turn to. Now, this is my other thing, and I tell my kids this too. Every one of my grandkids has a get out of jail free card. They can call me with anything, anytime. If it's detrimental to them, they know I will tell their parents. I've had runaways that have called me, and I'd say, you can't come until your parents know. They all have a solid, I call it a significant adult other than parent. And that's where grandparents can really shine, because if they have that trust, the nephew I talked about that has the fishing guide thing was adopted. So was the sister. Well, their mom and dad are both gone. This is a child who has nobody on the face of this earth but Uncle Neil. And he is so warm and wonderful. And he reads my little newsletter every week. And I comment on his fishing pictures and all this kind of stuff. They need to know there is some connection. And that's why your work is so darn important, because family, that's where it starts. That's why I call it a family newsletter, because they all know, and they know that so-and-so got a new job and moved to Jackson Hole. And so if they're out that way, they know to look up somebody. It's a connector, if you will.
You're speaking of tools in which they can use. So because we're nearing the end of our time here, what are some tools, some of those nuggets that you have in your chest of life that you can open up and unlock that box and share with our audience?
I used to love to watch the show The Mentalist. Patrick Jane was the psychic. And he got out of that business and he started helping a lady police detective. And because he knew psychic was not honest work, and I believe the backstory was that he had lost somebody to suicide or something, and so he had gotten away from that. But he always appeared to be psychic. So he'd walk into a crime scene, and a lot like the lady now that dresses real fancy, but he would see things that nobody else saw.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd notice the chair had been moved a tenth of an inch or something. And he would notice that it would seem as though he knew something that nobody else knew in the room. And they'd say, "You're psychic." And he'd say, "I'm not psychic. I pay attention." That's the tool for a parent. That's a tool for a grandparent. That's a tool for family. Pay attention. That's exactly it. It goes back to the kid, my nephew, who feels seen because I pay attention to what's going on in their lives.
Well, I am paying attention to what you're saying, and I have been paying attention since we started this podcast here. And I want to say this, that yes, I have stepped into this journey and trying to find answers to what is a societal issue. And as I shared with Greg, I will be on this journey until my last breath.
Yeah.
But in so doing, I know that what I am doing is not individual. It is collective. It is going to take many of us to make a dent in society. And I am honored to know and have met you to see the work that you have done and to know that I'm there with you now. And may we take this journey onward in whatever capacity that lies before us. And because we are old enough and wise enough to know that we're not perfect, and there still may be incidents of opposite ends going forward. But I want you to know that I'm there with you and the rest whom I have read that you have been connected with. It's another one on the road here now.
Well,
thank you.
I think that families are worth it. I think that children are worth it. And I know that grandkids are worth it. So
every bit of it.
But Terry, I know from reading about you that you gain as much as I do out of the doing. And that's the magic of this thing. Everybody keeps saying, "How can you keep doing it?" I cannot not keep doing it.
Exactly.
I love it till my last breath. I'm going to be sitting right here at this computer typing something out. So
we keep doing it because we are part of this human race.
Yes.
It is the race that has gotten us here. Yeah. And we have a pretty good idea of what's going to take us into the future. And it is our children, our grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and the posterity thereafter. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for this platform. I love what I'm doing, and you've provided me with that opportunity. Thank you. We will be talking again soon.
Yes, we will. Today's conversation reminds us that loving our grandchildren also means respecting their parents, communicating with care, and choosing connection over the need to be right. To learn more about Neil's work, be sure to check out his book, The Bridge to Your Grandchildren: What Their Parents Want You to Know. Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep building stronger family connections.